Hey everyone, it's Dr. Naomi Wolf, and I'm so honored and excited to have with me today one of my personal heroes, like one of the top 10, honestly, personal heroes of the Pantheon. And also I'm proud to say a personal friend, and that is everybody knows Dr. Paul Alexander. Welcome, Dr. Alexander.
Hi, Dr. Wolf, and can I call you Naomi for this show?
Please, please.
Okay, Naomi, thanks
Thank
very
you.
much for having me on your show and the chance for us to have this brief chat. Thank you.
Of course. And Dr. Alexander is among his many illustrious credentials, as well as his own personal heroism. Many of you know that he was one of the very first highly respected researchers, an advisor to President Trump, a host of other distinctions, one of the very first to come forward early on to raise serious clinical questions, academic questions about the COVID narrative in general, about the safety of the vaccines, about the suppression of therapeutics. And he's been an absolutely dauntless kind of advocate for humanity and for medicine and real science. And additionally, many of you know that he was quite lionized and continues to be by the truckers movement, because he actually went to be with the truckers in Canada and in the United States and to advocate and stand with them. So most recently, Dr. Paul Alexander, along with his co-author Kent Heckenlively, has written a really important book called Presidential Takedown. And the subtitle is How Anthony Fauci, the CDC, NIH, and the WHO conspired to overthrow President Trump. And this is an explosive behind the scenes look at President Trump's final months in office, and basically how the COVID crisis response was a carefully crafted plan, in Dr. Alexander's view, to ruin him. So who would know better? Dr. Alexander was there. He was a former senior advisor to COVID pandemic policy in the US government for President Trump. And he was also the former COVID pandemic evidence synthesis advisor to WHO/PAHO. So he knows all the players from the inside as a distinguished advisor to these national and global health authorities. So let's jump right in with that. And everyone needs to rush out to Skyhorse Publishing to get it. Tell me why you felt moved to write this book.
Well, first of all, Naomi, thanks for that generous introduction. And you can get this book at, if you want to consider, at Amazon. Presidential Takedown. So the reality about it is this, that I was working at WHO as their COVID advisor at the beginning of this pandemic from around January of 2020. And the reason why I was asked is because of my background in evidence-based medicine.
Sure.
I mean,
jumping in, what is evidence-based medicine? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, evidence-based medicine is the field. It was started in around the mid-80s, early 90s by Dr. Gordon Guyatt. He is the founder of evidence-based medicine. This entire field, this term evidence-based economics, evidence-based policy, what it really was is that up to around then, the argument was that clinicians, surgeons, etc., were making decisions, clinical decisions on how to treat their patients, what next to do, not based on the actual research evidence, that they were making decisions based on what their colleagues down the hall did, what they heard when they came out of medical school.
Oh, wow.
And many of them didn't have that practical experience. So Guyatt and they formulated this paradigm and said, look, if you are a doctor, if you are a surgeon, etc., especially those connected to hospital settings, often they would have medical libraries in those hospitals. If you're dealing with patients, even if you have a surgery and you have the opportunity, the time, even in preparation, go to the scientific literature and look at what has been published in terms of the body of evidence on that issue. And don't just do stuff based on what you've heard.
Wow.
Do stuff based on the actual data and the evidence, because shockingly, it was not practiced like that. So
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah. So that's the thing. And the field has mushroomed over the last 3 decades, where you look at the entire body of evidence to make a decision. So evidence-informed decision-making means if you had a question, you don't just use one study to answer it. You do a systematic search of the evidence databases, and you find everything you can find. You set some parameters if you want. Say, I am going to search the literature from 1990 to 2003 on this question.
Right.
And whatever I find, I'm going to summarize it in a systematic way and give you a conclusion, not a recommendation, just a conclusion of what the body of evidence said. Anyway, so WHO asked me to advise them. And then around April, May of 2020, when President Trump had already set his task force, they asked me if I would come to the Trump administration to be a senior pandemic advisor at HHS, Health and Human Services, which my job was to interface between the task force, that's Fauci, Birx, Hahn, the whole group, and the Oval Office, reporting to my bosses. Anyway, well, the key is what I realized there, Naomi, very early on is this, that the pandemic response in the Trump administration and the Biden administration is not a public health response. It's a political response, and every single decision is made through the lens of politics, and that's a devastating thing to me looking on. That's number one. Number two, I grew to know a lot of people there. I think the assumption was that I had a political bent either way. It is not politics. It was not politics for me. I went there as a scientist, and I supported Democrat governments before. I supported liberal governments before, and I also supported Republican conservative. To me, is what is best.
Right.
And what I saw were public health officials who were not serving Trump or the Trump administration or any administration, had it even not been him, have not been serving them optimally. And people would discuss with me that in the various agencies, CDC, NIH, FDA, and these are career officials and scientists, that their job really was to make Trump's handling of the pandemic as chaotic, as ungovernable and unmanageable as possible, that it would impact his re-election potential. And you know, I will tell the listener this, Naomi, so that they'll understand. You know, there are a lot of people who run around and huge Trump supporters, whatever, and they say, really, no, President Trump it was theft. They stole the election from him. He was wrong, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? I'm not an expert in that area. Maybe historically, we may actually get to find out that votes were fooled around with and stolen. We may get to find out that none was stolen. What I am trying to say is this. In January, February of 2020, the internal polls showed that President Trump was unstoppable, that there was no Republican who could challenge him, and he was defeating every Democrat, internal polls, including Biden. However, from around July of 2020, those same internal polls were telling us that President Trump was in a lot of trouble electorally. Unstoppable in January, February, but we knew around July that he had a huge problem. And the argument I made in the book is that he even still does not want to face the fact that the lockdowns and the school closures and the collateral effects of it, the deaths and the harms that accrued, hurt him electorally. That's the point. And these people in these agencies, I mean, Dr. Deborah Birx said in her book that she actively worked against President Trump. She slow-walked the etc. So it was a concerted effort. And whatever they find in the future, how this is looked at historically, the end of the day is the American people lost, because we had people running around, fooling around with this pandemic response. We still do. And in the present administration, look, I want President Biden to succeed. And you might say, well, will you work for President Trump? I want any president to succeed, any administration, because then we as the people succeed.
I understand.
And that's what this fight is for.
Let me jump in there because you've explained a lot. First, I just want to say, as a listener and as an American citizen, if you've got people being paid by taxpayer dollars who are actively working to undermine the president of the United States, that is actually treason,
Yes.
and also grounds for impeachment, because you're not, it's unlawful to take taxpayer money and work to undermine the elected representatives of the people of the United States of America. So that in itself is very chilling, what you just said. And I know that Deborah Birx has admitted to it. And, you could see, Dr. Fauci like smirking behind his hand. In all of my time as a White House spouse, as an advisor to a presidential campaign and a vice president, never, ever, ever have I seen anyone in the chain of command stand on a podium with the president and, give visual cues to undermine the president. So that's huge. But I before we get in the weeds, and I'd really like to spend the whole rest of our time on your book, and we can circle back another time on, the issues that we're uncovering at DailyClout. I would. It's important. I've known you, for some time, and you've been working very hard you've been very preoccupied with the material in your book, that there was a takedown of President Trump. And I've never fully understood what was driving you, but now I think I do. You're saying that instead of a public health response to attend to the fact that there was this virus and people needed care and we needed policies to, keep people safe and protect our elders, that there was a political intervention. It happened to be for a Republican president. It could have been just as serious for any president, to derail what the president was trying to do. So that's serious enough. But before we get into the weeds of how and who, I have to cut to the kind of end and ask, who was behind them? Right? Because a bunch of bureaucrats like Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, Dr. Collins, don't just collude with each other to undermine a president. It's much too dangerous to do that unless an entity or people who are even more powerful than a sitting president are behind them. Do you have any speculation about that? Does the book go into that at all? What do you think was driving that?
Well, I mean, look, you've asked a very important question. And the thing about it is that I could speculate and you could speculate at some people use that term as the unseen hand, that really are the players and the forces behind the scenes. Of course, the truth of the matter is that these people are paid by the taxpayer, but they seem to operate in the government in a manner that is averse to what is best to the public health and to the best interest of the United States. Right. And I mean, I'll be honest, Naomi, I could rattle off a bunch of names like what people we see on the news and all of the Davos and the WEF and all of that. But I just want to focus on the players that I played with, which is those in the task force. And I'll share something here, What hobbled Trump was this. It was the initial 5 or 6 lies that the task force said on the podium daily in the beginning that really doomed the pandemic, because it messed with the minds of the public, and those messages stuck. Importantly, we were under the threat of leaks. Right. And what I mean by that is this. The White House made some directives that the task force was out of line with whatever Trump was doing. So Trump would be out on the stage discussing opening schools, opening society, doing this, doing that, whatever he's speaking about. But their message would be opposite and against what science was showing.
Oh my God, that's horrible.
So they made this thing that okay, you see, the problem is Trump was in a very difficult situation, unlike any other, because when Obama came into power in 2008, 2009, he faced the H1 pandemic, but that was in his first few months. That was not during the election year. Right. Trump was trying to thread the needle of a pandemic response during the height of his re-election, where in January, February, he saw that he was going to be re-elected. All of a sudden, with this economy that was booming, everybody was humming along. All of a sudden, you told him, we have to shut it down. And he's trying to tread the needle. And what we had was, we would have, so the White House made this directive. If Fauci, Birx, whomever is going on in the media, going on MSNBC, going on CNN, wherever they're going, Fox even, they would have to tell different agencies, including the White House, but the offices that I worked with, what was the topic that you're going to talk with? We will tell you what the president is going to talk about today, this week, and that you could get his messages to line up, so the president wouldn't look like he's off script, that everybody's on the same. Well, what we would get in those meetings, Naomi, was Fauci's team, Birx's team, Fauci himself. They would go nuts. They would threaten us in discussions that when this meeting is over, we are going to leak to the media that you all are muzzling us and silencing us for Trump. So that was something that we were dealing with almost daily, because they did it a couple of times, and it took about 2 weeks for us to get back on message and to clean that up, because that was not true.
What you've described, which is the president's message team setting the message agenda and other people falling in line with what the president's messaging is absolutely standard in a functioning White House. And so for Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx to threaten that if you did your job and followed the president's messages, they would leak and say that they were being muzzled. They're not supposed to be freelancing, right? Every White House is, he's the commander in chief. Every White House is supposed to support the direction of the president. And if they can't do it, they're supposed to resign. So that's extremely they threatened you, but go ahead.
The thing is, and that was a very hobbling thing, because most of these discussions surrounding what you were going to say. So my job in some of these meetings were, like, my bosses would want me to explain to them more in a layman terms of what it is that the Fauci team, etc., was saying, and what is Fauci saying. And at that point, they were pushing the lockdowns. They were continuously keeping schools closed with the teachers' unions and masking. And I was explaining that your policies were not in line with the science. And that was a serious discontent between them and myself. And they were fighting me, NIH and CDC and Fauci directly. And that's an example where we would threaten that the media, all the media, 24/7 would loop it, that you are muzzling Dr. Fauci. And so it was a huge threat to us, because then we would then have instructions that we'd have to step down a bit, because we didn't want that to be leaked. Well, it wasn't my decision, but remember, Trump too was in an election year, and I also have to say I'm convinced when I look back that a lot of these decisions, and you would know this for somebody who's intimately involved in how the executive and stuff runs, the president doesn't actually know some of the minutia. She's delegated to a lot of people, and they might be making decisions that the president doesn't even know, thinking it might be the best thing, but it may not be. Maybe if you would have spoken to Madam President or Mr. President, they would have said, no, don't do that. But that's what we play with, right?
Right.
It's a big problem. That threat of leaks is what really constrained the pandemic response, because we were constantly running behind Fauci and they with their messaging, and their messaging was against what my job with Dr. Scott Atlas. Remember, Atlas and me were on the inside, Naomi.
Well, so this raises the question, I mean, this is just extraordinary. And how could you possibly run a pandemic, let alone a re-election, successfully under these circumstances? And I didn't vote for President Trump, but, as an American, this is horrific to hear. Like, no one could succeed as president if their subordinates, made these decisions. But what President Trump is very good at firing people and, and being decisive about not tolerating people who are not loyal. Why do you think he didn't fire Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx, and so on?
Well, you see, Naomi, some part of me would say, well, had he done that, a lot of people would say, well, who is this guy? This guy is a non-scientist, non-clinician. He's in a pandemic. Yes, he's an election year, but these people know more about this than him. So he's reckless and dangerous, and that is what Fauci and their team was signaling to us almost weekly. That if you moved on Fauci, because let me tell you, President Trump actually wanted to remove Fauci and replace Dr. Fauci with somebody who was more balanced, complete. Because Naomi, let me be as blunt as I can. None of what Fauci and they were doing comported with the science. I mean, we could look at it today, we could go back 3 years, it was averse to the science. So if President Trump did move on Fauci, it would have been actually a proper move. But you see, they got constrained because of this election year. Had it not been an election year, we'd have probably not even been in the situation we're in today. That election year.
You raise an incredible possibility. I don't know if you're doing it intentionally, but again, listening as a political consultant, it makes me wonder if the timing of the whole pandemic was to unseat President Trump from a second re-election.
In a way, that's what, I'm trying to say things in the book, and I have to be as open and fair with you too. There's a lot of things that I have seen, I sat in, but for executive privilege and confidentiality, I could never discuss, ever. And that's it. But I'm trying to go at the edges and to give my view whilst respecting these people.
Yeah.
Because that would be wrong.
I understand. No, there's a great deal of confidentiality and of course a non-disclosure agreement that goes into anyone who serves in the White House or as an advisor to the president or to someone like Scott Atlas, Dr. Atlas. Well, you guys are both heroes.
Oh, Dr. Atlas for me is one of the best people that America actually had, and he was so vilified and smeared, but this guy was probably topmost, and I think history will record him so.
Yeah, I think you're right. Well, so you've been so generous. Everyone, the book is Presidential Takedown by Dr. Alexander, and his co-author is Tony Lyons at Skyhorse. He's the independent publisher who publishes Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Dr. Malone and other leading lights. And Dr. Alexander is among the most leading of the leading lights. And again, a true hero for this country, for Canada, for people in the world. And a friend, and with this book has made yet another contribution. How do people find you on social media and Substack? And should paying members?
I write this daily blog. It's my Substack. It's called Alexander COVID News, and that's just ALEXANDER COVID News. And I just try to put my points of view on what I read and stuff, and it's my point of view, and it's unique.
Subscribe, become a paying subscriber. I'm proud to say I am a paying subscriber. It's absolutely compelling reading every single day. News, unbelievable, and rush out and buy Presidential Takedown. Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Thank you.
Bye.